All right. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to White Collar Week's Tuesday Night Speaker Series. Our speaker tonight is Michele Weinstat Miller, a very good friend of ours. We're going to tell you more about her in a little while, but we're glad you're with us tonight. We are recording tonight, so if anyone's in our live audience on Zoom and you would not like your face on camera, please shut off your video. Other than that, we got a little bit of housekeeping to do. This event tonight is brought to you by our White Collar Support Group, which meets on Monday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern and 4 p.m. Pacific. And we go for 75 minutes every Monday night, and we talk about topics that are important to our white collar justice community. We've been doing it for over 8 years, and next Monday, is our 412th meeting. And we've had over 1,000 participants. So very, very happy and proud to say that. So you'll find out more information about that on our website. That's prisonist.org. That's prisonist like feminist, prisonist.org. I'm going to announce our speakers that are coming up in June and July. On June 4th, we have Tara Simmons, who's a justice impact person who got out of prison, became a lawyer, and now is a Washington State representative and a criminal justice advocate all over the country. And so she is going to be our guest again on June 4th. And on July 9th, Sabrina Morgan, who's a group member of ours and has an incredible story to tell. I hope you'll all join in. I'll give you a little peek there, among other things that happened to her in the course of her criminal justice journey, is that she got shot in the back of the head by a police officer, and she's here live to tell the story. So she's out there somewhere. I think she's listening in tonight, but she's going to tell us her whole story on July 9th. The last announcement I have is on October 19th, that's a Saturday morning at 9 a.m., we're going to have a white collar conference. It's the first conference ever held by white collar justice impacted people for white collar justice impacted people. And that lineup and everything we're organizing right now, a lot more information to come. But if you'd like to volunteer or you'd like to sponsor, be a sponsor, hit us up again on our website at prisonist.org. Or you can send us an email at info@prisonist.org, and we will respond. And sponsorship packets are being prepared right now, and they'll be going out soon. So thanks, everybody. We're so happy to have Michele here with us. Michele has been a guest before on the podcast, and but her fourth novel came out this spring, and we were really happy to promote it. And promoted it on all our social media and everywhere because she's been such a good friend of ours. She has an incredible story of resilience and rising to the heights, basically, of what people can do when they come home from prison, but not before. A very serpentine story that she's going to share with us tonight. So what we are going to do tonight is we're going to let Michele give a little bit of opening. Then I'm going to get into conversation with her a little bit. We haven't really done that on this format before, but we're going to try it tonight. Then Michelle's going to read a couple of book excerpts for us from her 4 books. I'm going to name all 4 books. How about that, Michele? Her books are not in, I don't know which one came first or second, but one is called The 13th Step, Zombie Recovery. Another one is called Widows in Law. Her last book was called Gone by Morning. And then her most recent book is The Lower Power. And they're all semi-autobiographical in that they have to do with drugs and criminal justice. And a lot of them, or maybe all of them, are cited up in where she lives in the northern tip of Manhattan, in Harlem and in Washington Heights. So links to at least her most recent book, Lower Power, are in the chat. And so, and there will be a Q&A after we're done talking. So Michele, welcome to White Collar Week, and I hope that we can give you, 5 minutes or so just to say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then let's get into some conversation.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's so good to be here. Thanks for having me, Jeff. I'm not broadcasting from any place special, like fancy. I'm in the basement of a place where we house, I'm the general counsel at the Fortune Society, which a lot of you know of. And we have here people in transitional housing coming home from prison. And then next door connected is a building where we have both affordable housing and many units of supportive housing for people coming home from prison. And, in this building alone, there must be a dozen people who've done more than 30 years in prison before they got here. So we're like kind of the last hope here for often elderly people coming out with as much as 50 years in prison. So I count myself as lucky as only having done a few months, a couple of times on Rikers Island, which I guess, some of my friends who've done decades in upstate prisons are scared of Rikers Island. So I guess that's not so great. I just a brief background about me. I was a drug addict at 13 years old. I was one of those kids that are out in the street really young. And as sometimes happens, I actually got myself together by the time I was 15, after having been raped at knife point and been, basically sexually abused on a regular basis, and having created a lot of trauma for myself, or been subjected to a lot of trauma being in the world of an addict at 13 years old. But I pulled myself together and I decided I was going to prove to everybody that I was not the screw up that they thought I was. And I went on to achieve quite a few things, not all of them honestly at the beginning, but I hooked and crooked my way out of high school by 16. And then I did college in a real way. Like, I didn't do anything that was improper in college. I really worked my butt off in college, but at the same time I was living with a cocaine dealer, and it was a domestic violence situation. And I just had no idea about the nature of addiction, that I had to abstain from all drugs, and all alcohol. So I just kept on just switching seats on the Titanic and ending up hitting bottom. So I ended up deciding that since I felt I could do college. I was doing college fine, with 4-year pace, that I would make it 3 years to prove to everybody how wonderful I was. So I went to NYU Law School at 19 years old. And in my first semester of law school, I, ended up in leaving this man and domestic violence, the whole thing. And I ended up having another bottom with cocaine, getting myself together again, and then still graduating law school at 22 and not doing any cocaine at that time. We were talking about roller skating earlier. Like, in all of that stuff, some of the things that I did was I was the city champion in roller disco. So I'm dating myself. And but it was wonderful fun. I mean, great. So pretty much sober fun until it stopped being sober, because once again, I had to switch seats on the Titanic. But, and I was also a black belt in karate. And, I was just like super insane, just basically building a resume, but, I had some good times in there. When I got I went to a big law firm, once again, trying to prove to people how wonderful I was, instead of doing something I probably would have enjoyed, going to the Legal Aid Society more, but I had to, get all those prestige points, and I was doing stuff I hated. And my father died in my first year at the law firm. I was 22 at the time. And, I basically went off the edge, because I was an addict, There's no doubt I was an addict. I had just tamped down on it. And so when that bottom fell out, I just started doing an awful lot of cocaine. And those were the days when Studio 54 was still open and all the clubs were still open. That, like, it was the 80s, Michael Jackson was in the clubs. I mean, it was just a fun time, except for the fact that I went home and like I, created a perforation in my nose. I couldn't stop using. I would stay up for 4 days on this at a time. And I became a drug dealer at that time. My best friend had gotten busted and asked me if I wanted to take over her business. And being that I was so smart, I thought, what a good idea, you know? And so that's what I did. And I started, basically it's because I was doing so much cocaine that my mind was a complete like mess. Like I had no ability to think through or think of consequences. And I was 23 at that point in a law firm. I mean, like my kids are 21 and I understand how bad the decision making could be. And they never have been addicts like me. So, yeah. So I ended up deciding that I was going to sell drugs full time, and I left the law firm and went to the clubs and sold to the clubs and did all, and you know, eventually I ended up switching seats on the Titanic to heroin and stopped doing cocaine because, I had these perforation in my nose and I was getting hallucinations and the like. And ultimately what I ended up with was an A1 felony charge for possession of about a key of coke and a firearm and, a whole bunch of other minor things. There was a 16-count felony indictment. It took a little while for me to raise bail. And then when I got out on bail, I went to my first meeting and they told me I had to stop selling drugs. And I thought that wasn't a good idea. In fact, I didn't think it was a good idea for me to stop doing drugs, but I actually did. I really wanted to stop, but it took me a long time to be able to stop. And I had another few months. I was remanded to Rikers Island. I was arrested again, and again, because I had stuff on me when they arrested me. And so there were three additional, I was arrested at court and I had stuff on me that I had another indictment for. Yeah, it was fun. Anyway, so it wasn't fun. And it took me about 6 years. I ended up winning the big case on they didn't have a search warrant. They could have easily called in for a search warrant. They did not. I guess, I don't want to get too deeply into the legal of it, but I guess they might not have felt they had probable cause. And so the evidence got suppressed, but the other two cases remained, and I ended up plea bargaining to a felony conviction. Now, I was very high when I did that plea bargain. Like, it took me about 30 years to think back on it and say to myself, wait a second, that wasn't I probably could have gotten a misdemeanor and not been disbarred. But I did that. By that time I was about 25, 26 maybe. And so I was disbarred. And that's a big blow. To those of us who've been disbarred, it's really bad. It does something to you, and it did it to me. Eventually I got clean, and I got clean in a 12-step program, and I did not go away. And it took me, hi Russell, it took me until it was time for me to apply for reinstatement to get clean. I hate to say that, well, I got struck willing when I said to myself, well, my boyfriend had gone to prison. He was not the same, abusive boyfriend. He was a new abusive boyfriend, and he had gone to prison for selling heroin. And I had the opportunity to get clean when I didn't have somebody else I was trying to get clean with. And I also was like 3.5 years before I could reapply for reinstatement. And I got into the programs, and it was just turned my life around. I was struck willing. All of a sudden, I'm the most hard-headed person in the world. And, so I've been clean for 34 years. And ultimately, somebody from the program offered to represent me for free at my reinstatement hearings. I had heard me speak at a Bar Association meeting of the Substance Abuse Committee, and he approached me and said that he would do it pro bono. I looked at him skeptically because I was still cute back then. And he was like, no, I don't want anything. And he didn't, and he put in a lot of legal work. As you guys know, who've been reinstated or who've been through the process, I don't know how many tens of thousands of dollars worth of legal work he did. And I got my license back in 1994. It took me about a year to get my a job, and I started, obviously going from a big firm associate, I ended up going to the New York City's Administration for Children's Services and came in as an attorney one, doing family court work. And I've, managed to, and I only got that because I knew somebody. Like I was speaking on a drug prevention conference on a panel, and one of my co-panels was a head of juvenile rights division at the law department in New York, and he knew somebody, and they hired me because of that. I wasn't getting a job, and back then, it was even before Block the Box. It was like, I mean, like throughout my career, like a lot of people have it a little bit better now because you could at least go to the interview before they get to ask you about your criminal conviction, at least in New York. But I have went through my entire career, and I, hopefully I'm at my last job now. But I don't plan to go anywhere. And I went through my entire career having to talk about drug use in my 20s during an interview, if I got an interview. And so, I feel everybody's pain, but I do want to say that there is life after a felony conviction, and that I've managed to have really a glorious life. No, I do have some glass ceilings. I've had some glass ceilings, but I sometimes, as I go along, I get a little bit more humble and realize that maybe there are also personality and, issues that might be a glass ceiling. Like, like there's a reason this girl decided that she was going to become a drug dealer rather than staying in the practice of law. And even though I am much, much, much better after 34 years, there's probably, it was probably just as well I become CEO of some major Fortune 500 corporation, which in my grandiosity, I would have thought was where I should have ended up, right? But like that I could just be in this place where I could be service to people and feel so satisfied with my career, raised a couple of kids, just, I can't complain about my life in any way. And I think I said enough, Jeff, on that. Yeah.
Michele, I am so impressed that you got through all of that without taking one breath. It's unbelievable. Of
I've
course
told it a few times.
Of course, I've heard your story a bunch of times now, but there's so much of it I relate to, and when I was in law, I went from to law school from 1978 to 1981. And so a few years ago, we had our 40th reunion, and it was on Zoom because it was during the pandemic. And it was, I had just gotten my law license reinstated. So this is 3 years ago. And for all of those years, for the 20 years where I wasn't practicing law, like I didn't reach out to anybody. I was so ashamed. I was so embarrassed. And so now I'm on Zoom with classmates from 1981, and it's like I know that they have to know my story. It's like it shoots around the class. Like did you hear about Michele Weinstat? So have you been able to reconnect with anybody from back then? Have you been, I mean, how is it like when you see people from high school or college or law school? Is there any of those people that you still are in touch with?
Yeah, I'm not in touch with anybody from my law school. I don't have a single relationship from law school. Frankly, I wouldn't recognize him if I passed him in the street. And, and I guess that's because I was so young and I was out roller skating in Washington Square Park after school every day. I wasn't really at the same space as most of us. I ran into, another associate, like who I was associate with, who was a partner at my law firm, and it was perfectly nice. I don't know who knows what, I mean, I've run into people, I don't have like an issue with it. I mean, the one thing I could say is that there came a point where I could like friend people on Facebook from where I grew up.
Yeah.
And and frankly, it was after I had a whole ton of accomplishments post, like it was like, maybe my third book,
Yeah.
my third book, and and having had like, that I felt comfortable. So but I also, a lot of, a lot of my I didn't feel connected to any of the people. I didn't stay in touch. I was in a completely different life than them. But I also think that because of like the fact that my younger years there was so much basically sexual abuse going on. It was like didn't have much interest in a lot of the people from back in those days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of strange how trauma can lead to like just cutting off complete parts of our lives, How, how, how much of that would you think that you were able to release yourself from in writing these novels? I mean, did you find them therapeutic? I mean, how did you even think that, okay, I want to start writing a novel, and then you're sitting there grinding through the first one, or so tell us about that.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Russell. Yeah, I mean, I was such a using addict during the time when I was arrested, so it was nobody was going to stick through me through anything, and I'm glad that other people get the support. I think that, well, the lower power, the first draft I wrote quite a long time ago, and it was very cathartic. It really is about recovering. Where I recovered, I got clean, uptown Manhattan, and it really is about, like, it was capturing a lot of the good of that time, but also like the fear of being pulled backwards, and so that fear, ends up being in my writing a lot, like the idea that you're going to get, like, in the lower power is sort of supernatural, so it's the fear, like the tagline is when evil pulls you back to the hell you thought you'd escaped, right? But some of my others are about people being, there's people being unjustly accused, or people getting, drawn into a mob, like a mob thing, that they really were trying to live a different kind of life. So there always does seem to be some sort of backstory. My literary agent, I think, is getting tired of it. She's like, can we move on already? And we do. And they're about, like, my crime novels, particularly. I always say that, resentments are the biggest fuel for my novels. Like I mean, Widows-in-Law was inspired by some stuff that happened when my ex-brother-in-law was died in a car crash, and like, so I had some resentments. Oh, he's so funny. The 13-step zombie recovery was about an apocalypse where only people with the alcoholic gene survived a zombie apocalypse, and they had to, get along and be quiet, and and it was like alcoholics and children of alcoholics who are natural enemies in the world, right? Like, because the children, like, we screwed over the children so badly, or the children are so screwed over by, and so they're stuck together in a zombie apocalypse. And that one, I had a little bit of a thing about super dogmatic AA groups. And so I was like having a little bit of fun with some of those groups that, like, if you're not they really do work. I mean, it's not, no offense to those groups, but like, if you're not from them, and sometimes it could be pretty startling in those meetings. But anyway, but it was all in fun. So I would say yes, catharsis. And I'm just waiting. That my problem with having worked the program for so long is I don't have any resentments. And so I don't have anything to write about right now. I'm like, what am I going to write about? I don't hate anybody. But
So for those of you out there who aren't in a 12-step program, Michele and I are in the same program. She's got 34 years of sobriety. I have 22 years of sobriety. And even 20 years ago, I remember being in very hardcore rooms. I mean, it was just at the tail end, kind of when half the room was smoke, or there were still ashtrays out there. and I went to a meeting in Mount Vernon, and it was on the second floor. It was an outgo. Remember outgoings where like groups of people from groups from your home group would go and listen to and support a speaker who would go speak at another group. So we were going to this meeting in Mount Vernon, and in kind of a sketchy area. And but maybe 10 of us went there, and we went upstairs, and they told us, they said, no cursing, no talking about anything but alcohol. And there were a couple of other rules. And that wasn't like how we were. We went to meetings where we could talk about anything. So the speaker gets up there, and the first thing they do is they start talking about their coke habit, right? And what they do is, if you talk about anything other than alcohol, they shut off the lights. So we're in the dark, and like no one knew, we didn't know what was going on. Like what do you mean? Like, are we being robbed? What's going on? And after about 30 seconds, they put the light back on, and they explained to us again, like, you cannot talk about those things. So that was old hardcore, recovery.
It was always wrong, but okay, let's not we don't have to get into that now, because that's crazy. That is crazy. Yeah.
So how is it that, you're going through all this, you're a drug addict from early age, as was I. Started at 13 too, by the way. And yet, like, it seemed like automatic pilot to go through college and then go to law school. I mean, was there, what was you thinking about that? I mean, you had to be somewhat ambitious, or it was just like you wanted to stay tucked into college, law school, and not really embrace the world. I mean, what was going on?
Yeah, I had no relationship with anybody in college either. It was like I went to a New York City commuter college. I was out at Studio 54 and various places hanging out, and so it wasn't. I was in martial arts. I was like out there living my life. So it wasn't that. I was extremely ambitious, and I did enjoy. I mean, don't get me wrong. I was very passionate about martial arts, and then I was very passionate about dance and about skating and about the stuff I studied. I studied languages. I still love languages. So I was just, look, like they say, addiction is a rapacious creditor. There was no getting around that story, and I had to just change completely. But it didn't mean that I didn't have times when I accomplished a lot. I was kind of like a tornado. I just had no ethics, or like I don't know. I mean, I was always politically active, but I was just very self-centered. I was fueled by self-centeredness.
The heroin might have had something to do with this.
Well, that was later, but yeah.
So let's jump to the Fortune Society and to the books in your current career a little bit, because what I'm hoping is that people tuning in, or people out there who are listening on Zoom, I want them to look at your experience as one of hope and triumph and overcoming things. And it's a big deal, to become the general counsel of the Fortune Society. It's the largest criminal justice nonprofit in New York City. Its budget is probably over $60 million a year now. I'm guessing that's pretty close, right? And they hired you first as a non-legal position, right? And then,
well, no, it was always a legal position.
So what was your first job there?
It was sort of the employment lawyer. We called it senior director of employee relations. It was a cut and pay, but I had I worked for 25 years with the state and New York City. So I had a pension. It was the middle of the pandemic. And I had just done an inventory about what did I want to do?
Mhm.
You know, did I want, you know, what was I passionate about? What did I love? And I realized that I really loved when I was helping people figure out how to solve their problems. You know, I had been in sort of a prosecutorial role for 5 years and I really didn't like it. And so helping people, like, you know, so you go into like an HR department and they've got this going wrong and that going wrong and all of these rules that apply to it and they don't know what to do. And you sit there and you brainstorm how to help them. And I've always, throughout my career, I always kept two things up front. Like, do I like the mission of the place that I'm at? And do I, and so furthering the mission and helping my coworkers to have a better life, because we spend a lot of time in work and I can help, you know, I feel helping people that I work with is just as important as the mission of helping, you know, the clients, or, you know, I've been in affordable housing, I've been in children's services, you know, so the people are important. And so I love that. And so I came there, but within about 4 months, I was promoted to general counsel, because I had really been, you know, it was a natural progression, and they kind of needed a general counsel, and then I got to hire somebody to do my job before, which, you know, I mean, I kind of liked the work before, but so, but I, you know, I mean, I felt it at the Fortune Society is the first time I really felt like I was happy I went to law school, and I was happy I spent so much. I'm like, when I got my license back, I just wanted my stuff back. I wanted my credibility back. I didn't want people saying anymore that I'm a former lawyer or I used to be a lawyer. There's nothing worse than when people say that, you know, and so I just wanted that back just so I could get beyond it. But I never really felt like, I always thought I should have been a writer. I always should have been a journalist. You know, and I didn't do any of those sort of unsafe things. Well, today, most of the writers I knew back then are unemployed. So I guess it was the right thing, because it's not easy being a writer, you know, nowadays. But coming to the Fortune Society, where I feel so connected to the mission, and I really adore the people I work for and work with, including Jeff, who's just the best. Yeah.
Thanks. I'll just hear you.
It just makes me really happy to be a lawyer.
So why don't you explain to everybody what a general counsel is in a nonprofit? Because it's a C-suite office. I mean, there's a lot of advisory, there's a lot of crisis management. There's a lot of budgeting issues. I mean, what do you do as the general counsel?
Well, I'm sort of, you know, the all-purpose general practitioner, and yeah, you get all sorts of things all the time, dealing with, you know, the risks for the agency, and having, you know, dealing with outside litigation, making sure that's handled properly, making sure that our policies are correct, and that we are honoring people's rights. You know, what do I do, Jeff? Help me here.
Well, as a general counsel, I can tell you it's either before, during, or after budget season. That's the whole deal. Everything has.
Well, you know, I mean, actually, we have a strong CFO, and so you know, I mean, we're certainly looking at the contracts, you know, as from the attorney's perspective, looking at the contracts, but in any given moment, we have, you know, issues arising, whether it's around contracts or around employment stuff, or workplace, you know, violence, or, you know, lately I've been leasing a lot of buildings, and so I've had to learn how to do that kind of law, and which is really fun, because I've been doing it for about a year. Like we rented entire buildings to house people coming out of Rikers Island, and I've, you know, I guess I've written the leases for maybe 3 or 4 buildings, and that's a whole commercial real estate is like crazy difference. And I kind of know most of the stuff now, you know, I mean, I'm sure not as well as somebody who's been doing it for 20 years, but like we have to just get in and roll up our sleeves and do things we haven't done before. And then also be smart enough to know when to, you know, give it to outside counsel, but try to minimize that to the extent you can. Because it's expensive.
I was a real estate lawyer who had to learn criminal law the hard way. So I understand. So, so the
Thank you, Jeff. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. I'll pay you later.
So the Fortune Society hires people with felonies and with criminal justice backgrounds. And I know that you have been helpful to 2 or 3 of our white collar justice group, white collar support group members who've been looking for jobs. So what kind of opportunities are there with the Fortune Society for people who have criminal records, and especially, you know, white collar records? Because I know it's opened up a lot in the last few years.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least half of our C-suite have criminal justice background. 50% of our agency have criminal justice history. So there, and I think we have about 90 openings. So, you know, sometimes it's just a question about getting humble and taking something that is less than what you would have taken before all of this happened. But the good thing about Fortune is that, unlike a lot of other places, well, we're used to people coming in those circumstances. So if they've got their heads together, because sometimes it's emotional too, like we have to be ready to, like, it's sometimes you know, starting off with a small job that's easier than what you could have done before is a good thing if you haven't been. It's a good thing, you know, if you haven't been under that kind of stress. But we're a place where people can be recognized, like just the fact, like I didn't come in as a quote unquote criminal justice hire. I'd had a long career. I did not feel like I was going in, and I did what I did because I wanted to do it, you know, so I was in a little, and it was of course a plus that I had a criminal justice history, because that is a plus for us. Because you're gonna care about our culture of, you know, how we do things and all that, but and our mission. But they quickly realized that I could do more than they had hired me for, and were smart enough to make that happen. You know, like not that many people get a promotion in 4 months of that kind of magnitude. So, you know, I just, you know, suggest that, look, people don't have to. I saw somebody say, I've already had humbling positions. Well, you know, you don't have, if you've had humbling positions and you've got it on your resume, well, come in and apply for something bigger, because you're not going to be turned away because you have a criminal justice history. In fact, it's a plus factor for us, but you have to be living in New York. That's we're close by so that you could work here. So that's, you know, something that makes it, that's a limitation for some people.
Yeah,
because very few people are doing 100% remote. That's not usually an option.
Yeah, I just want to point out to everybody who's watching or listening that sometimes the biggest limitation that we have in getting a job or getting our career kickstarted again is ourselves. And so here we have, you know, it's hard to hire up in a $60 million agency. It's hard to find enough good people. It's hard to keep those jobs going. And there's attrition and there's all kinds of things. And there they are, they're interviewing probably every day to fill these jobs. And yet there's a lot of people with white collar criminal justice issues and other kind of criminal justice background issues who don't believe that they can get a job, or they don't believe the jobs are out there. And so, like, here it is. I mean, here's the raw proof that, and because the Fortune Society is not the only organization that hires people with criminal justice backgrounds. I mean, certainly one of the premier ones, but not the only one. And that's true in every city. So what is it that you find, because I know you've been involved at least in a little bit of the hiring decisions, or a little bit of kind of making connections for people. What do you find are people's biggest limiting steps in terms of getting back into the workforce?
Well, I mean, I don't want to underestimate that, you know, how it impacts people. I mean, even though people don't look at criminal, like in New York, other places are tougher, you know, but in New York, they don't look at criminal history, you know, before making a conditional offer of employment. But when you're coming, like when you're a person, say, who's a law school graduate and you're going to apply for a case manager job, it's like kind of a, you know, they could see that that's what it is. And you know, I mean, I think like anybody else, we have people who are problems holding jobs, or we have people that are in interviews and it's not what they're looking for, or it doesn't seem like it's going to be a good match. I mean, I mean, all sorts of things happen in interviews. So, you know, and I think that we've all gone through like sort of the ringer, as they say. And I mean, my first job was a secretary. I worked as a secretary, you know, to a lawyer for, you know, for quite some time, you know, and then I worked in providing drug treatment services or administration and drug treatment. And then I went and I did this, you know, when I got my license back, I went and I made, you know, $45,000 a year as a, you know, working in family court. And it was like kind of a shit show working in those jobs. But so whatever happened with me, I mean, I just find that there are jobs out there, you might not be in the right place. You know, maybe, you know, like we have a whole program in Fortune where people do interview practice, where they practice what they're going to say about themselves, where they work. We help you put together a resume. Like we've got guys like, yes, okay. So we've got guys, I think people want to ask questions, but we've got people that have these long, wonderful resumes. And our former CEO, Joanne Page, she used to look at the resumes and I didn't realize, and she'd see the location of this fantastic job. And she would say, oh, that one was in prison, that one, because people are in prison and they're doing jobs and you could put it on a resume, the job that you did when you were in prison, and you don't have to have a gap in your resume. You know, I had a gap in my resume because I was running around the streets like a lunatic, not because I, you know, was in prison, right? So, you know, in any event, so, I mean, it could be a challenge, geography, skill set, not really feeling like we ourselves may not feel that the position is right for us. And it could be kind of depressing looking at some of these jobs.
Well, Michelle, what we're going to do is we're going to open up to questions from our crowd here. If you'd like to ask Michelle a question, please put your name in chat and I will call on you. Bill sent me a couple of questions in private chat. So Bill, why don't you go first? And please, people, put your questions in chat. You can ask Michelle about her background, what it took to get a job. You can ask her how hard it is, how she overcame. You could talk to her about the Fortune Society, about prison, or about jail, or Rikers, anything you'd like to ask. All right, go ahead, Bill.
Oh, thank you. Just got my hands out of a bowl of shrimp. I'm cooking dinner. Michelle, it's always great that you come here, and I'd love to hear you speak. So I have two questions. I was in the car when you were talking about, you know, yourself and your kind of tornado personality. You know, in our group, we sometimes refer to it as the controlling type A personality. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to ask you how you feel that contributed to your addictions when you were younger. And then the second question, totally unrelated, is that, you know, with the recent change in leadership at the Fortune Society, do you foresee any new initiatives or expansions of services or anything, you know, new things on the horizon for the Fortune Society? So thank you. Thanks in advance.
Well, I was hard-headed, I think. Hi, thanks, Bill. I was hard-headed when I was young. I was always the one who, like when I was a toddler, would want to run in the puddles and stuff, and my sister would be trying to hold me back. So yeah, I mean, I think that I definitely had that. I think I had some neurodivergence. I probably had you know, they would diagnose me with a whole bunch of crap nowadays. Back then they didn't do that. So luckily I was spared all that medication. But you know, I definitely, you know, when I first got clean, I thought I could figure that my job was to try to figure out why I was an addict. And then I came to realize that trying to figure that people want to figure out why they're an addict, because if they could figure it out, they feel like they could use again. I mean, bottom line, it's like I don't know why I was an addict or why I was so extreme. And I do have to say that my kid told me yesterday, I have 21-year-old twins, and one of them just got home from study abroad, and the other one's still studying abroad. They're going to be seniors in next year. And he told me, Mom, you know, I'm worried about my friends meeting you. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, everybody agrees you're very eccentric. So I don't know what that means. I'm like, and he says, I often make him cringe. So anyway, I think that whatever it was about my personality that made me so unusual probably still persists. And hopefully it's just going in the right direction. In terms of the Fortune Society, we did, you know, we basically have transitioned from a person who was here from the 60s, or I think it was almost, well, no, the 35 years she was here, so from the 80s. And now we have our CEO is previously incarcerated and very much connected with the communities that we serve. And I think it's just been fantastic. Like, he's a wonderful person. We are expanding into a lot more housing, and that's partly because the city is willing to fund us to begin taking people that would otherwise be in Rikers Island. So we are just, you know, we've got hundreds of beds for people that we didn't have even a year or two ago. And we bought a building on the Upper West Side, to the chagrin of the Upper West Side. If anybody of you knows the Upper West Side, like, they were not thrilled that we were opening a building with people who were previously incarcerated, and they, you know, but they were better than the way the Bronx responded. And so we have you know, a new building that's opening that was an illegal hotel. So it's the first hotel conversion to this kind of affordable housing, was a supportive element. And we're also opening a building on a hospital campus in the Bronx that they're giving us. The city is hopefully it will get final approval from the city council. The city is giving us a building for medically fragile people coming out of incarceration, so that they could be living in permanent apartments on the medical campus and get the help that they need. So we're thrilled about that. And we're also thrilled about the fact that they're giving us the building for, I think it's a 100-year lease they're giving us. And so, like, so that's some of the new stuff that's on the horizon that's really exciting.
No, Michele, thank you. That's really great. I'm glad to hear that.
So Michele, I was looking at an old 990 at 60 million. You must be way over 60 million now with all this stuff. So
well, we had 60 million already, so it must not. Yeah, I mean, what are we up to, Jeff? Do you know? Are we going to be 70 or 80 this year? I don't know. We're going up in leaps and bounds.
Yeah, well, we just got, after taking over the SRP program that Father Ricks is working in, I know that bumped it up a huge amount.
Yeah.
I'll do the research during the next question, Michele.
Okay.
Let's see. Brandon asked a question. How do you overcome the power of Google News stories? So I guess the negative
yeah. Well, first off, I was pre-Google. You know, so I didn't have that at first, but that meant that I was always trying to hide stuff, you know, like it was really like everything was a big secret. And in fact, you know, people found out things and they used it as a weapon against me when I was like in litigation and the like, you know, I mean, there were some really ugly things that happened pre-Google. But when I started when my conviction and disbarment started being on the first page of my Google results, like when they started digitalizing criminal records, that was a sea change for me, because I had spent about, I don't know, I got clean in 89. So, you know, until about 2000 or 90, you know, around that, I was able to sort of keep everything a little bit secret. when that came out, and no matter what good stuff I was doing that would be on the Google search results, that would always be the first page. I just started to say, well, anonymity is fine for the people who are able to have it, but what I need to do is own my story and tell it freely. Like, there would have been a time 15 years ago that you wouldn't have caught me dead on this Zoom platform advertising the fact that I had a conviction history. But you disarm the people when you own your story, and then you have a ton of accomplishments, like results speak for themselves. So at first I was just trying to like get the Google results to go down a few pages, and they have actually gone down, but it depends on the day. It often comes up on the first page. Now, I think most of the news, like the news stories, that folks would have now, I would have maybe had back then if it was a different time. But so, I mean, I don't know what kind of shame some of those news stories bring up, but other people may have more information about like how readily that stuff comes up on the top. But my suggestion is, go someplace where you're presenting to a board of directors and it's like a government or something like that, so that it has to come out, like it has to be published. Like, there's so much crap about me on Google that it just drowns out the bad stuff, but also just that I talk about my story. So who's holding it against me?
Yeah, exactly. Tom, then Russell. Tom.
Hi, Michele. Really, your story is so incredible. I sort of don't know what to ask you, because I mean, you've been to a part of two of New York's biggest institutions, Rikers Island and Studio 54. And I also, what I really want to know is what song you danced to when you won the roller disco competition.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, D Train, maybe. D Train was a favorite.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. That I don't know. That's a good question. Good trivia question.
No, but what do you think that there is really any? I actually used to write about Rikers Island, even though thank God I've never been there. But do you think there's any chance that they'll actually ever really close it?
Soon they will eventually. That it costs $500,000 a year to house an inmate.
Yeah.
On Rikers. So
Yeah,
hopefully somebody will get
Harvard instead.
Yes. So hopefully, I mean, little by little, somebody will see the sense of doing something different.
But it's the politics of it, isn't it? Because if you're it's close it and move everybody out to the boroughs, and none of the boroughs want any of the people. So how could it possibly ever be done?
I don't know. I'm hopefully.
I think she was a resident, not necessarily a decision maker at Rikers.
Well, I understand that, but
no, but we do have staff going in there. We do have staff going in there. I was never too fond about any of the other jails in New York anyway. So I visited like a few, and not particularly fond of those either. So folks tell me that I have been visited Rikers a lot of times too, and it's really hell to visit. So I think being in the community would be better. I think it's going to get done. I just don't know when. And whenever somebody, like when de Blasio made it like a 10-year plan, and you knew he was only going to be in office for 8 years, you knew that was kicking it down the line. So we'll see what Adams does.
Well,
all right, thank you.
Maybe your next book should be a coffee table book about prisons that I've known.
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
Thanks, Tom. Russell.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep. Go ahead,
Okay. All right. For the record, I'm a fan of D Train myself. Yeah. Brought back memories. Anyway, since I've been home, I've worked in workforce development, and I've had a few things. My problem is, I guess, when you mentioned the personality issue, I was so happy to go back, at least have an office job, that I went in full throttle, a lot of vigor, and I guess what they told me, I was doing too much. And my wife told me, you're in there trying to do everything and doing all this, and people have been sitting around the office doing nothing, and you're actually kind of maybe showing them up a little bit, and it kind of works against me. When I first got on this in this group, Jeff had mentioned the Fortune Society, and I did get on the website and look at some of the positions and things you have. But of course, I'm in Philadelphia. So I guess my real question is, are you planning to expand your footprint? Or, I know many people commute, but anything I've seen there, the commute would eat the salary.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, also, I think people, people who are, there are people commuting from Pennsylvania, and it's really hard. I don't understand why they would do that to themselves, but people do it for, because it's a better salary in New York and the like anyway. But yeah, I mean, we're not going to, I don't see us going to Pennsylvania because we still have so much to grow here in New York. We are we do a lot of training and, with organizations, I think in Pennsylvania, not that I know many details about it, but we're not really going out there. But you should, I mean, I guess you're not going to move closer. I mean, and I think that in the culture of any organization, it's just really good to easy does it. Like, I think we all want to prove ourselves too much. We've got so much to prove, and like, it takes a certain amount of self-discipline to really see how things are done. And, easy does it, but do it.
My last job, my supervisor just blurted out, I'm not intimidated by him. He used to be a lawyer. He said that, and I'm sitting there looking at him like, where did that come from? So evidently there must have been a meeting about me. I mean, you knew that because you saw my resume. So why isn't it an issue? The previous job before that, they took offense because I brought my degrees to work and hung them in the office. And I said, well, when people have degrees, they usually put them in the office. I don't, those are the type of thing I've been running into. I've got jobs, and workforce development seems like an area that is accepting of people who are justice impacted, as they say now. So I was trying to stay in that field and things like that, workforce development, reentry, all of that. But I keep running into personality conflicts and people who seem like they take offense that I have the degree, even though they hire me because I have the degree. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Thank you, Russell, for your question. Thank you. Siobhan, did you want to ask your question, or should I ask it for you? Siobhan wrote in.
I'm
There
sorry.
she is.
Hey,
Go
I'm
ahead,
here.
Siobhan.
It took a second to get it unmuted.
Mhm.
I just wanted to know, do you know of any organizations like yours anywhere on the Gulf Coast, like Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Panhandle area?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe Jeff has more connections than I do. But
Yeah. So we do have support group members down there who are in organizations down there. Siobhan, if you write to me or to Bill, we'll get you in touch with those people. You got it? Good.
Thank you so much.
Okay, sorry, I don't really know. I don't want to say I know something I don't know.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Mr. Wortkin, you want to say anything?
Oh, don't put him on the spot.
Oh yeah, put him on. Yeah, I know
No.
I know you're a Michele Weinstat Miller fan.
Well, how about this, Michele? I mean, if you were going to recommend one of your books to everybody out there to start with, tell us which of the books would you recommend and why?
Oh, that is so unfair, Jeff. I don't know, if you like something sort of like The Stand comes to, then I would say, The Lower Power. If you like crime thrillers, I happen to like Gone by Morning better than Widows in Law, but I don't know why I should say such a thing, but I just like that one, and it is a very much a justice impacted main character, so that's kind of fun. And and I loved writing the zombie book because you get to travel all over the United States with a crew of like addicts and alcoholics and Al-Anonics, and it's a sort of funnier book than some of the others. So that might be why. But I still
And
like Widows in Law, don't get me wrong. Widows in Law is my
How
biggest
many-
seller, actually.
Okay. How many books did you have to write until you wrote a good one?
Yeah, the first one was pretty good.
Yeah, I think you know what I don't know about anybody here, but when I was inside, everybody writes a book.
They do.
And
They write a lot of books. This guy's here who
everybody
wrote 9 books. They were in prison so long. They come out and they literally say they wrote 9 books. And I'm like, yeah.
The
Longhand.
wisdom I got was, you had to write 3 before you write a good one. But you knocked out the first one and you liked it.
Well, I mean, yeah, it actually got me an agent very quickly, so yeah.
Yeah.
Not the first draft though.
Well, that's a really, you know what? I'm glad Jeff asked that question. How do you research your books? Or is it just life experience?
No, I mean, well, the first book before the internet, I used to do things like call the FBI and ask them questions, but now, it's so much easier. I mean, obviously there's life experience, but like when I was looking at sex workers, I would, it's easy now with Google. It makes things so much easier to try to find information. When I was doing stuff where one of the characters was a press officer in City Hall, well, I have friends who were press officers in City Hall, so I would call them and get detailed, information. Or if I had questions, like I've been to this part of City Hall and not that part of City Hall, what does that part of City Hall look like? And I would get little tidbits about how, Mayor Bloomberg used to come to the press room and eat the candy on the desk all the time, like stuff like you just get these little tidbits, and all of that stuff like is so enriches your book. I also, a lot of my stuff, like it will be structured, or like I have a lot of fun with, politics and stuff like that. So Going by Morning, I made good fun of de Blasio, and like, because they had a very tall mayor. I'm not saying that was de Blasio, but there were just like fun things in the news all the time that you could incorporate into the story. But yeah.
So
That
Michele,
research,
thank you.
yeah.
so Michele,
Thank you so much.
thank you, Bill, and thank you,
Thank
Jeff.
you. Bill.
So Michele, we're out of time because Indiana is up 16-9 right now. So we know you got to get to your Nick game.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. We didn't get to doing a book excerpt, but we'll do that next time. All right, is that all right?
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
fine.
So Michele,
So I don't know, 16-9. Do you think does anybody think the Knicks have a chance here? How many minutes are they in? It's bad, huh?
I don't know. They're at a commercial right now, but
Okay. No, I got a no from Siobhan.
No, the Knicks just don't have it. They don't have enough bodies, Michele.
I know. It's so
they're all hurt.
disappointing. And we started off so well.
So anyway, thank you so much, Michele Weinstat Miller. 4 novels out there now. The Lower Power is her latest. All of them are available on Amazon. If you're watching live, I put the link back in chat again. If not, it'll be in the show notes. This will be on YouTube and on our website within the next couple of days, and Michele will send your link. So, Michele, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Really, really wonderful. And, we love you. And,
Okay.
and good night, everybody. Blessings. And,
Thanks for having me, guys.
and, we'll see you
Appreciate
again
you.
next time.
Bye-bye.
Michele, thanks for hiring, and looking out for our people.